Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today we are here for the next hour to talk about all things Celtic. Flying solo today, so get your thoughts in the comments and we will talk about every aspect that you wish to discuss. Be that over the last weekend, the week coming up, and the meltdown in third place, because we've got to give them their true and rightful place in Scottish Premiership division. The table does not lie, as they say, and Celtic are sitting pretty at top. What did you think of the reaction to Celtic drawing 2 each with Aberdeen at home after having been 2-0 up? Was it over the top? I've seen quite a lot of reaction, not just on our streams, but on the social media channels in relation to Celtic not being as good as we thought we were, etc., etc. I've ran with room for improvement. I think that room for improvement is a fairer analysis of where we are. I think we've looked really good for the best part of this season, and there's been some areas that have been highlighted both at home and abroad that we need to work on, and it's something that I'm pretty sure we don't have to tell Brendan Rodgers, because he will see it himself and he'll have his own team of data analysts reporting back in relation to what is going wrong. Aberdeen then, when are they going to finally be looked upon favourably? Because I still feel as though they are underestimated by a lot within the media, and even fans. That they're looking at them and they're thinking the bubble's going to burst. We were all over them in the second half. We created a lot more chances than they did, etc. But we all know that that doesn't always result in winning games of football, and it didn't at the weekend. And Aberdeen, I think, showed a resilience that had we came back like that away from home, and maybe even felt unlucky not to take more for the game, I believe that we would be talking about championship winning form, and that's the mentality that you need to win championships. When Aberdeen do it, I feel as though they're still getting written off. So let me know what you think about that. Going into Atalanta, what do we do differently going into the Champions League game? I know that Brendan Rodgers discussed after the Dortmund drubbing that we play our own way and we just need to do it better, and we need to adapt to the situation in game, but we still play our own shape and our own style of football. Talking to John Hartson last week, John obviously knows a thing or two, and he qualified his opinion by saying that obviously Brendan Rodgers knows a lot more about setting up a team at that level, and we all concede that. We know that the gaffer knows a lot more than we do. However, John, and I agreed with him, said that we should approach it differently against Atalanta on Wednesday night. What do you think about that? Should we be a wee bit more savvy, a wee bit more defensive? And let's actually connect that in and link that into the performance we've seen at the weekend, whereby in the first half we gave Aberdeen something of a trouncing. They were very physical, I felt, and that, from the very first minute, actually, they were very physical, and that could have derailed us, but we stuck to our game plan and the quality shone through. Second half was different, wasn't it? First part of the second half, anyway, I think they got a bounce from some very good decisions by the manager, making substitutions at half-time, who made an impact on the game. They get back into it. And, at 2-0, it's almost cliched now that the next goal is huge. We said it at half-time, Sean and I, covering the match. And so it proved to be the case, because Aberdeen got that first goal in the second half. They then equalised and then, for a few moments, believed that they were 3-2 up. It was always going to get chopped off, I hope, because it was definitely a handball. And then obviously Celtic think that we're a goal up with the Adamida. Adamida off the bench scores a goal. And again, you look at that and you think to yourself, probably got that right. There was a bit of impeding going on by Alistair Johnston on Mitov. But the one that I do want to talk about, the one VAR decision that I do think needs further discussion, is the last kick of the ball, or the last hand of the ball, or the last knee of the ball. What did you make of that? So what we're talking about today, what did you make of that final decision? Yes, no, or still on the fence? Were the images that we've seen as consumers of this game they call football good enough for us to even make a decision? What are they looking at that's different on the VAR? Can we have a look at that? Also, Aberdeen, when will they be taken seriously? Celtic, what changes do we need to make on Wednesday night, if any? That's personnel and also the shape as well. Another discussion point I wish to discuss is the wingers. What about the wingers? Were they part of the issue at the weekend? Now, we have been very much in support of the wing play this season, talking about, in particular, Nicholas Kuhn, who I think has been sensational, nothing short of sensational. One game that I thought he let himself down, but most of the players did, was obviously the Dortmund game. He, for me, wasn't up to his usual standard at the weekend, and I don't think Maeda was either. And that, of course, affects Kyogo. We've seen it last season, how the wing play affected Kyogo. And I think one of the issues that we had and will have in a scenario like that is Brendan Rodgers will be watching the same game as us and looking at the wingers and thinking, well, you know, Kuhn's coming in maybe too much, not hitting the line. Kyogo loves that ball across the front of goal, doesn't he? He's got the anticipation, he's got the speed of thought, he's got the speed and then the quality of finishing to get on the end of these chances. How many of those chances were created by Maeda and Kuhn at the weekend? I've seen Alistair Johnston doing a lot of overlapping. He seems to whip in a ball. Even Ralston, when he's taking the place of AJ, he can do it. Hits the byline, whips it in. Kyogo loves that delivery. He loves that service. And on the left-hand side, you tend to get a wee bit of that from Valle. I think Valle done it really well when we played Ross County. So how big an issue are the wing positions for you? Is it just an off day? Because that's another issue, isn't it? When they're having an off day, what's your options? And are the options good enough? Are they quality enough? And I said at the beginning of the game, we had three wingers on the bench, Yang, Palma and Forrest. And all these seasons later, we still go to Forrest first. And we were right to go to Forrest first. He was the best option. So what does that say about Yang? What does it say about Palma? And what does it say about our plans for January as well? Now, obviously, being on my own here, there will be more of an opportunity to get as many of you involved in the chat as possible. I know sometimes we get so engrossed in the chat with up to 4 contributors on here that we don't get a chance to get your thoughts up on the screen. So we're definitely going to do that today, and we're going to do it with gusto. Please don't think for a moment that there's favouritism when we're bringing anybody up. It's just a case of quite a lot of comments coming down the right-hand side of my screen that you can't see. It's very rapid. It's coming in from various platforms, be that Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, X, and Instagram. At the moment, I think if anything else becomes available, we will stream on there as well. So there's no favouritism. My eye to finger coordination isn't that good, I've got to admit. And why does Jungle Lion come up more often than not before anybody else? Is because more often than not, he comments before anybody else. Happy Monday Club says Jungle Lion. Absolutely. And I don't know where you are actually, Jungle Lion, if you're on at home shore or if you're away topping up that tan. I'm not sure. Let us know. Patrick, you're in and you're commenting on the X platform, formerly Twitter. CCV, GT, they need to come back. Greg Taylor, of course, and Cameron Carter-Vickers need to come back into the team. Bernardo next in line for a midfield spot. Right, so there's 2 points here, Patrick. Very well made. Thanks for getting in on the action on X. We hadn't been streaming on X for a while, and I wasn't quite sure why. It wasn't because it's all set up at this end. But what I realised is that in order to stream, you need a blue tick. So I had to join the blue tick club. Other people call it a different type of club in order to stream on that platform. So here we are, Patrick, and we're doing it on my own personal page rather than the Acsom pod page because they're obviously wanting us to become blue tick ambassadors on a number of different platforms. We'll do it on one at the moment. Carter Vickers and Greg Taylor need to come back into the team. So there's the first one that you've thrown out there, Patrick. And I think that we could probably go both ways on that conversation. We'll start off with Carter Vickers because last week I started talking about Carter Vickers coming back for the Aberdeen game. Why was I so confident that he would be back? Simply going by the information we were given by Brendan Rodgers prior to the international break. And so I expected him to be back in the team for Aberdeen. There's also that decision to be made that although we're focusing on the game against Aberdeen, and we're certainly not underestimating them, we'll come back to that, because others are, I believe, underestimating them. And I don't mean us as Celtic. I just think the media, I just think the team languishing in third place might be underestimating them. When will the penny drop with these people? Who knows? Carter Vickers, for me, in order to take part in the Atalanta game, I think I would much have preferred him to be involved in the Aberdeen game. It seems kind of obvious. It's not like he's a new player that you're going to throw in for a baptism of fire. He knows what it takes to be a Celtic player. He's a successful Celtic player, having won a double, a treble, and a double, and he's played in the Champions League, but he's missed out in the Champions League as well, Patrick. I wouldn't mind having a look at all the games we played in the Champions League over the last 2 and a bit seasons to see how many of those matches he missed through injury. Because I do remember, players like Maurice Jens playing in place of him in Angie's second season, and then, of course, last season, we lined up for games with Lagerbielke at the back, didn't we? Remember, he was sent off against Feyenoord. And I was reading this morning that the same referee will be refereeing our game against Atalanta. Of course, he sent off Lagerbielke and Odin Holm on that night in Feyenoord away from home. I think we did pretty well, considering we only had 9 men. So, Carter Vickers, for me, the big question is, let us know in the comments section what you think about this. Is it becoming a concern? Because when I spoke to Sean at the weekend, I raised the question with Sean, and we kind of got to the conclusion that ordinarily, he's probably the best defender we've got. He's one of our star players. Ordinarily, it would be a concern. But we now play a squad game. Not everybody's going to play 50 or 60 games a season. And we need to get into the way thinking that some players will play maybe closer to 40 games, 35, 40 games in a season for Celtic. And Carter Vickers might drop into that category. I'm actually going to have a look to see on average what he is doing in terms of appearances per season for Celtic, because it would be interesting. But one of the players that always springs to my mind when I talk about that is someone like Tommy Rogic, because in terms of games over a season, it wasn't always up there in the 50s, was it? So having signed for Celtic on loan, Carter Vickers made 44 appearances for Celtic in his debut season, 2021-22, 44 appearances, okay, under Ange and Ange's first season. He followed that up, and this was the campaign where he went for surgery near the end of the season, after we had more or less clinched the title, having defeated Rangers with a Scottish Cup final on the horizon. It was against Inverness, Caley Thistle, and Ange thought that we could win that without him, and he was right. So Carter Vickers was sent for surgery, and he made 39. So he goes from 44 in season 1 to making 39 in season 2. Under Brendan Rodgers, in Brendan's first season back, as I said, there was injury issues. Obviously, he was still overcoming the surgery from the previous season. He makes 31 appearances. So you can see the trajectory is kind of gradually going down there, isn't it? 44, 39, 31. And then so far this season, he has appeared on 7 occasions. But what I would say in relation to that as well is when you look at Carter Vickers and his playing career prior to coming to Celtic, having started off with Tottenham Hotspur, and then there was that raft of loan deals that were made at various different clubs. He's never been a kind of 40 game a season player. So you look at his first campaign at Spurs, he makes 4 appearances. He then goes out on loan to Sheffield United and Ipswich. So he has 2 different loan deals, and he plays 35 times combined. So 35 games, that's his first kind of breakthrough season. Swansea are the next team he goes to. He plays 33 games. He then again spends another season at 2 different clubs, Stoke City and Luton, and he plays 31 games. And then AFC Bournemouth, he goes there and he makes 26 appearances. So he's never been that guy who plays to the kind of extent that Celtic will expect an ever-present to play. So he's not making 50, 60 appearances for anybody prior to coming to Celtic. And then under Ange Postecoglou in his first season, he makes more appearances than he has ever done before in a season. So has that impacted him? His body not used to the rigours of playing for a club like Celtic, who compete or participate in 4 different tournaments every season. Is it a concern? Let us know. If he's fit, what do we do with him against Atalanta? Does he go right into the starting 11? Does he get a seat on the bench? If he's on the bench, how confident are you at this level with Trusty and Scales as your centre-halves? That's, I guess, the next question we would ask, Patrick. Let us know in the comment section what you think. Greg Taylor needs to come back. Greg Taylor, yeah, I think when you look at the consistency of Taylor in Celtic's side, and the fact that when we brought in his backup in Alex Bailly, he was the only left back we had at the club. And even when we did have a backup in Alexandro Bernabe, for example, he wasn't really challenged for his jersey. So he's, I'm not going to say he's been coasting it. He's too much a professional to do that. But I think it's better to have the challenge. And thank God we did bring in a left back, because lo and behold, Greg Taylor gets injured. Again, I would echo what I said about Carter Vickers in relation to going into that game against Atalanta. And I think also you've got to look at the backups. Why the club, if they're not good enough to play, not only against Aberdeen at the weekend, but in European football's premier competition against Atalanta. If you spend £6 million on a centre half, then hopefully you would expect him to be able to slot in. I'm talking about Trusty in that case. Valle, I quite like the look of him. I don't think that we've seen the best of him yet. I also think that there's physical enhancement and development to see in the player, particularly upper body strength. We've seen it with Kieran Tierney, didn't we? He came back from a pre-season and he was completely ripped to completely different shape. That will happen with Baye, maybe not this season, of course, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure who starts on Wednesday night. If both Greg Taylor and Carter Vickers are fit, I think that it's easy to say throw them in because they're better, aren't they? They're better players. Greg Taylor, a fit Greg Taylor's a better player at the moment than Alex Bailly, and same can be said for Carter Vickers. Let me know in the comments section if they're fit, they play. That's the way I would go. And again, the third point, Patrick, was Bernardo going into the weekend's game. The lineup that I suggested, my predicted midfield, was made up of the captain, Callum McGregor, flanked by Arne Engels and Paulo Bernardo. That's what I suggested. Obviously, Rio Atati gets the nod. He scores the goal. And Bernardo comes on in the second half. I think, I've seen it suggested. And I want you to let me know what you think about this as well. Because this is almost like a go-to. This is almost like a default complaint whenever things aren't going our way, I've noticed, and it's to start questioning Callum McGregor. And I remember probably the last 2, maybe 3 seasons of Scott Brown, and he fell into that trap as well, whereby, if things weren't going our way, we look at the captain, we look at the fact that he's the wrong side of 30, and we start questioning how good they are. And I've seen something similar this season with Callum McGregor. This is the same Callum McGregor that has been prolific in the first few games of the season. I think he has benefited from stepping down from international football. The natural regression of a footballer playing in the engine room, Celtic's midfield, will always be evident, but I don't think it's so obvious that he is a weak link. I've seen a lot of this kind of chat after a 2-2 draw against Aberdeen, who, let's be honest, are our nearest competitors at this moment in time, our nearest challengers. And I just think it's sometimes a default setting. You go for the captain because he's maybe on the wrong side of 30, etc. Let me know in the comments field what you think, because the suggestion I seen at the weekend was that even when the game's not won, we never consider taking off McGregor. And again, it might just be because he's a captain, etc. But I think Bernardo coming into the play at the weekend was a good move. It was a good substitution. You're looking at McKeown, who's pushing for a jersey as well. And you think at some point it might have made sense to actually switch McGregor because he might have been tiring at that stage. He's played so much football. Came into the Celtic first team really late in terms of age. He was 21 when he made his debut. But by God, he's made up for that, playing an incredible amount of games every single season. I wouldn't rest him if I could help it from the start, certainly. But what's wrong with taking him off 20, 30 minutes from the final whistle? And at the weekend there, I thought McKeown also came on, Patrick, and did really well. Probably hasn't put a foot wrong for Celtic yet. And I don't know when he's going to get his first. He's going to get his first start. We shall see. I'm not suggesting for a minute that that's going to happen during the week. Now, Lubo's Ibrox party. I'm sure Maeda was still jet lagged on Saturday. This kind of feeds in, I guess, about the chat around the wingers and the fact that they weren't the best at the weekend. I thought Maeda in the second half. I looked at I think it was maybe 60 minutes in, and I thought to myself, it's time for him to come off. There was a few things that happened. He gave the ball away too often. I know that he was criticised for that against Borussia Dortmund. But, if you're up against Aberdeen, they can punish you as well. He was giving the ball away, and I know that's one of Brendan Rodgers' pet hates. So he was hooked, and we had to bring on Jamesy Forrest, and he had to play on the left, and he's not as effective on the left as he is on the right. So I look a wee bit forward to that situation, think to myself, well, come January, we definitely need to buy a winger. Not that long ago, we had Jota and Lila Bada on the wings, and I think that in terms of the creativity and in terms of the delivery to Kyogo, they all seem to link in really, really well. I don't think it's as fluid, and it wasn't last season either. And it's not any issue with Kyogo. Kyogo, for me, is still the best in terms of talent, striker in Scottish football. But he plays a certain way, makes certain runs, and he prefers certain deliveries, which I don't think he's getting more often than not from the wingers at the moment. And by the way, massive fan of Kuhn. I think Kuhn's been tremendous this season. He was a wee bit off at the weekend, but particularly in the second half, in my view. And Maeda, he had a poor game. Maybe it was down to jet lag. We spoke about that. We spoke about, your guys who play for Japan and America. And it used to be the same with Tommy Rogic, didn't it, playing for Australia. And you got concerned about the amount of air miles. Stephen Sloan, always welcome on the chat. Stephen, you're commenting on the YouTube. If you are on the YouTube channel, give us a big thumbs up, do all that stuff. Hit the notifications bell, because as well as the live streams every single day, and also the live match day coverage, we have our big show on a Friday night, and This is Acsom. What is that, I hear you ask? This is Acsom. Really, it's a return to what we used to do back in the day, whereby the entire process of setting up a Celtic State of Mind was to speak to like-minded Celtic fans, to try and tap into what is it that we've got, as well as this shared love of Celtic. What else do we have in common? And what we found a lot of the time was sometimes, it's not universal, of course, sometimes it's political mindsets, sometimes it's the arts, music, etc., literature, poetry, all that kind of stuff. And we try and get people from those fields to come and speak to us. So we've had ex-players like Big John on Friday night, John Hartson, we've had Rudy Vata, we've had Tosh McKinley, Bobby Petta, Jackie and Sid, and we've had other people from the world of film, like David Heyman, who was unbelievable. We have had Tony Roper, and figures from the world of politics. We've also had Bernard Ponsonby, who was one of my favourites. And so if you tune in, get yourself subscribed. It's all free. Every Friday night, you'll also get This is Acsom. Right, so what the weekend showed, says Stephen, was if you press Rangers and Celtic, you can get results. We totally took the foot off the gas in that second half, and hopefully it's a wake-up call for the team. Well, hopefully it is a wake-up call, Stephen, because we know all the cliches about finding more about your players in adversity, etc. However, what I would say to that is, and again, it goes back to one of my earlier points, we weren't great. I totally agree with you. We weren't great. But I do think that there was two dogs in the fight, wasn't there? There was Aberdeen, and I've seen the possession, and I know they didn't have much possession and had half the chances that we did, and they scored two of them. I think that their changes were brilliant. I thought Jimmy Thielen made brilliant changes, substitutions at half-time. They were bold. He didn't wait until 50, 60 minutes to see if the personnel he started the game with could, play out a poor performance. And I think that a lot of managers do that, because if they have to make a substitution at half-time, it's almost as if they're admitting, we got it wrong. The manager got it wrong. They got the team lineup wrong. So if you make that kind of like a knee-jerk change, either in the first half or at half-time, you're almost admitting that you got it wrong as a manager. But he did that, and he made two changes. And I think that the physicality remained. The referee was a wee bit lenient with some of them at times. But yeah, we weren't great, Stephen, but I think it was allied by the fact that Aberdeen came out and made a real go of it. In terms of pressing Rangers and Celtic, I've got to say, I think it is a different battle against these two teams. We don't tend to focus on Rangers unless we're playing them. It's a wee bit different at the weekend when you extend your lead because, it's football. So you can have a bit of banter and crack and laugh at them as well. And also the meltdown, which ensues yet another meltdown. But I think that we are a different team. I think we're a different team. And I don't think, that people fear Rangers as much. And I don't think they've got the talent and the cohesion within their team and a dynamic within their team that can hurt teams as much as Celtic can. And I said this before the game, going into the game, and I said it after the game against Aberdeen, that Aberdeen are a better side from what I've seen than Rangers. They're a better side. But that's simply because we've played them both at home once. And I'm gauging it on that, I've got to say, because I'm so focused on Celtic that I don't watch every other team every other week. I might see highlights and goals, etc. But from what I've seen, Aberdeen are a better team. Obviously, I take account of the fact that we're early in the season and it's a long slog at times. However, at this moment in time, I can only speak in real time. They're the second best team in the league, aren't they? Jungle Lion, you're back in. Celtic got a wake-up call against Dortmund. Let's see how that goes on Wednesday. Right, so that goes back to the point we made earlier on in relation to whether or not we approach it the same way. I remember when Andrew was in charge, we had a very fixed way of approaching every game, and it was very good to watch. It was open, but generally at home, we could batter teams into submission. And then probably 65 minutes into the game, we could make 5 substitutes and then batter them again with fresh legs. And it was very effective. And it was the high line and the press, and it was high tempo, and it was very entertaining to watch. We then went into Europe and played the exact same way, and we were picked apart by better opposition who could probably play Ange ball better than we could. And that was frustrating because you're looking at it thinking, right, in terms of trying to make progress in Europe, we might have to change our style. And I was very interested to see how Ange did in season 3 at Celtic, which would have been season 2 in the Champions League for him, because I've said this before. I think one of his best qualities is the fact that he's a quick learner. So he goes in and he can make a mistake, but he learns very quick from it, whereas a lot of other managers continually make the same mistakes, and a lot of that's down to not even favouritism. It's almost like they continue to play the same way and play the same players, whereby a new manager coming in can make decisions on players who obviously have been very comfortable with a previous gaffer. So I think Ange learned very quickly, and he would have done that again in his third season at Celtic had he stayed. Brendan Rodgers came out after the Dortmund game and said that, what we're going to learn if we put 11 men behind the ball, etc., etc. And I go back, and I know things are constantly changing in football, but I go back to that Barcelona game, and it's fresh in my mind because we were talking to Charlie Mulgrew 3 or 4 weeks ago at our live event in Glasgow at Gracie's, and he also spoke about it on the warm-up as well. And I think Under the Cosh mentioned it, whereby the approach we had that night was to win the game. It wasn't to play swashbuckling football, entertaining football, which obviously is part of the Celtic fairy tale. It's part of our history and our tradition to play a certain way. They call it the Celtic way. What is that? What is the Celtic way, right? Because I remember it was the Liverpool way. They used to talk about the Liverpool way. And sometimes you've got to actually question what it is, because it can often just become a slogan rather than have any kind of meaning. So the Celtic way for me, and you might disagree with this, is winning and it's success. Now, it's great to have an entertaining brand of football as well, but I don't think it comes before the success. So the examples I would use are two of the greatest managers in my lifetime, or two of my favourite managers in my lifetime, were Tommy Burns and Martin O'Neill. Now, Tommy Burns, there's a real emotional attachment to that. Loved him as a player. It was his testimonial when I went to my first game at Celtic Park. So my memory of this ginger-haired icon was already kind of set in stone. He's got ginger hair like my dad. as well, the Ginger Legend. So Tommy Burns, for me, as a manager, played a very traditional sense of what Celtic maybe would call the Celtic way, which is, entertaining football, beautiful football that probably started under Jock Stein. Jock Stein implemented a style and an approach that, believe it or not, had not really been focused on prior to his arrival in 1965. Where did he get that from? Well, there's a thought process that a huge part of it was taken from the way that the Hungarians played football. And when Celtic won the double, 53-54, they won the double in Scottish football, and a number of the players were selected to play for Scotland at the World Cup. One of them was Neil Mokin, whose book is to my right as you look at the screen. And Bobby Evans was in that squad, as was Willie Fernie, and I'm going to say Bobby Collins. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. And basically, because Celtic had won the double, the board gave the players a reward, and the players were rewarded by getting taken over to the tournament, and they were able to get into all the games. And obviously, as a group of guys at that age, mid-20s, they would have enjoyed the country, the culture, and everything else that came with it. Jock Stein, however, as a player, sat in the stands of these games taking notes. And not only did he go to the Scotland games that his teammates were involved in, he fell in love with that great Hungary side. So this is the thing that's always really interested me. So Jock Stein loved that Hungary team, and he loved a particular player called Ferenc Puskás, who later was a massive influence on Ange Postecoglou, because he managed Ange's team in Australia for a couple of seasons. He was a huge influence. Ange called him the boss. So Jock Stein was hugely influenced by the Hungarian team, and obviously he would have known about Jimmy Hogan, who had been an absolute trailblazer of Hungarian football, but he also coached Celtic in the 1950s. How incredible is that? So the Celtic way was devised by Jock Stein, playing beautiful, inventive, free-flowing football, right? However, Tommy Burns played in that style. He played in that style because he was such a Celtic man, and he knew the fabric of the football club, and he knew what what it meant to the supporters. He played in that style. But when you look back on it, as great as it was, we won one Scottish Cup under Tommy. So when you bring in Martin O'Neill, and I've said it before and I'll continue to say it until I'm proven wrong, Martin O'Neill, in terms of football, changed everything. The domination that we are now looking at, yes, obviously the roots of that were sown by Fergus McCann taking over the club, rebuilding the stadium, and having the season ticket system, and obviously getting us on a firm financial footing, and protecting the brand and growing the club, etc. I get all that, but on a football sense, the domination started under Martin O'Neill. He came into this football club in 2000, 2001, and it was about winning. It was about success. Now, how on earth could you say it wasn't good to watch when you've got players like Chris Sutton, Stan Petrov, Henrik Larsson, Lubo Moravcik? Of course it was great to watch. But in terms of the entertainment and the priority levels, Martin O'Neill was about winning over entertainment. And there was plenty of games that probably weren't as good to watch as some of Tommy's games. But O'Neill was a winner. We won a treble in his first season. We got to a UEFA Cup final, etc. So what is the Celtic way? That was the original question. And I'm a great believer that the Celtic way is success. And then obviously if you can pepper that with entertainment, then absolutely brilliant. That's a bonus. David Boyle. Great game and atmosphere at the match. However, being there, I realised how open our midfield is. We need to tighten it up somehow, and McGregor can't keep playing number 6. David, that was one of the biggest issues against Dortmund, wasn't it? How stretched they were, how open they were. And I think that's the reason why we brought in Arnie Engels. We brought in Engels, obviously massive signing, huge potential the player's got. Another one who's getting a bit stick. I was very complimentary of Arnie Engels at half-time, David, at the weekend, because I felt that he, Kuhn and Johnston have got a great understanding down the right-hand side. And mostly what we did in the first half came down the right. I just thought Kuhn faded badly in the second half. I don't think Maida got into the game at all. But down the right-hand side, Engels, Johnston and Kuhn seem to have a really good understanding. And it's a kind of triangle out there with Johnson overlapping and getting the crosses in. Sometimes Engels cutting through the lines with his passing, which I think is pinpoint. And then Kuhn obviously gets that and has the creativity and the dribbling ability to take out a few defenders and change their shape without them wanting to change. So I think that Arnie Engels has been a great addition. But I don't think yet, David, we have got. I don't know if it's a personnel thing or if it's a shape thing. I don't think we've got a midfield playing to its full capacity. So I look at the midfielders, and I actually believe that it's the best and it's the strongest area of our team. If you look at the individuals, right? So what we've got Callum McGregor. He is the constant, and I do think that he's been pretty, for me, consistent this season. He wasn't good against Dortmund, but there were very few players who were. I think he got a bit of stick at the weekend there, but he's had very, very good games, and nobody's mentioned him this season because we're so used to him playing to a certain standard and a certain level. And he's a club captain. Around about him, you've got Rio Hatate, a player who I think is a playmaker. He can change a game. He was very good, actually, in the second half against Dortmund, Hatate, I felt. You've got Luke McKowen, who, as I said earlier, hasn't put a foot wrong yet for Celtic. Seems to have made an impact every time he's came on. There's an urgency about Luke McKowen, isn't there? Where he just wants to make things happen. He demands the ball constantly. Arnie Engels and Paulo Bernardo. And I think it's a case of not only deciding who from the five is your strongest three, and how do we actually utilise each of those elements in the best way possible, David? So you're saying that you don't think he can keep playing as a number six. Who does? Do you think Bernardo's better as a number six? Danny Boy comes in. Surely it's time that Hatate is not the first choice. It's got to be Bernardo. Well, that's interesting, Danny, because going into the game against Aberdeen, my predicted 11 said exactly that. I had Bernardo over Hatate. Why didn't I drop Engels? Probably for the reason that I'm not sure it would do good for him coming into this football club as a record signing, young player. Has he played particularly bad? Has he had a stinker of a game yet? He wasn't great against Ross County, was he, Engels? But I'm not sure it's droppable form. I think that you've got to play through that sometimes, and you come through it stronger as well. So that was my thinking behind Engels. And McGregor's a constant. He's always going to get picked. So the question then is obviously around Hatate. And I had said Bernardo. And I think that Bernardo will get the nod against Atalanta. I think the way we'll line up against Atalanta, it will be more of a defensive position within the midfield. I've heard the theories, and Big John said it on Friday, whereby we can kind of flood the midfield, not play as offensively. So you're probably looking at the wingers. I don't know. Is that going to be too difficult to defend for large parts of the game? If you don't have your out balls, who would be your out ball then? Who would be your one up top? Because then your options would be Kyogo, Ida, and Maeda. So these are the considerations for Wednesday night. If Brendan Rodgers sticks to his word, he'll play with three midfielders. He'll play the way that we played at the weekend. And the question is, Danny, who do you start? You reckon Bernardo starts? Is it alongside Engels and McGregor? Does McKowen get a start in one of the big ones? Paddy Lavery, deep fried Mars bars. Now, there's a thing. You can also get a deep fried toffee crisp as well, Paddy. So if you've not tried that, I would suggest that you do. Casper's always carried a bit. Remember, Arthur Boric carried a bit of weight as well. And I'm not sure if it's more to do with this injury that he's had to his left pinky or what's the other finger? His ring finger. That's not his index, so his ring finger. There's an injury there as well. Maybe that's affected him. And if it had affected him, then at some point you might have expected Sinisalo to get a game, and it's not happened. John Sweeney, welcome back to the show. And you are contacting us on the YouTube, and hopefully you're enjoying your Monday. Disappointed with Brendan tactically for that second half, as the Dons manager made the changes that worked, but Brendan waits till it gets to 2-2 to make the changes and need to be better for Wednesday. Now, the thing is though, John, at half-time, it was going well. and you wouldn't really have expected. I'm just having a look at my notes here, actually. I wouldn't have expected any changes, certainly at half time. We were 2-0 up. I felt that Nielsen was kind of lucky for Aberdeen not to get booked. I felt that it was 2 going on 3 or 4. We had a good couple of chances in the first half. Probably should be doing better with the corners because Trusty's getting to on the end of these corners now. We should have been doing better with that. So I thought we were looking good, and it was almost like we were on a cruise control. What do you do in a scenario like that? Because it's basically over to Aberdeen to make the changes at that stage, I think. And they did it well, and they worked out. Was it a case of us taking too long to then make the changes in the second half? Probably. I mean, Sockler gets a goal in 49 minutes, gets in behind Liam Scales, who I felt had a really good game up to that point. And they were right up for it at that stage. It came out again to be very, very physical. We knew that at that stage they could well have got the equaliser. And I thought at that point, maybe, John, maybe at that stage you're looking at it thinking to yourself, we should make a change. We didn't. And then there was a warning actually just before the goal, Shinnie's goal, where Bailly went for a ball and slipped. This was like 2 minutes before it, maybe a minute before it. He went for a ball and slipped at about the halfway line, and Scales was outstanding in covering. At that point, I was looking at Maeda and I was thinking, right, take Maeda off because he's off it. And obviously Aberdeen score, and then they score again. They score again after that. Thank God it was chopped off. But prior to their third goal, John, and you might have noticed this as well, we were all over the place. It looks as though we were all over the place and we were kind of losing our nerve a wee bit. Even Schmeichel was looking a bit uncertain. Kuhn lost the ball and then gave away a needless free kick. So yeah, I just thought we looked rattled after the third goal in a massive way, but we made the changes and we finished the stronger side, I think. And on another day, we would have got the third goal. You know, on another day, one of the chances that James Forrest gets goes in. And I think the one that I was more frustrated with was not the snapshot that Mitov saved, because I don't actually think Mitov knew much about that. It kind of just like went through a crowd of bodies and his position was there and he was able to palm it away. The other one was where it's gone wide. And I think that we've seen so often James Forrest just, knocking the ball with the outside of his boot, going right into the corner, and I would have expected him to score. And on another day, he would have scored. I've not seen any comments yet in relation to the handball at the very, very end of the game. I mean, I think that, where the referee or the guy on the side with the boards says that there's 10 minutes to play, Celtic were much happier with that than Aberdeen were. At that stage of the game, Celtic looked as though we were going to turn the screw and get the winner. Aberdeen hadn't at that point. I thought that they'd run out of puff and they were hanging on by a thread at that stage. Tony, keep the faith. Absolutely keep the faith. Whilst disappointed, you say, that we let a 2-goal lead slip. We're still top and 6 points ahead of the Zombies. It's all right, obviously, to talk about Zombies at this time of the year. Obviously, with Halloween just around the corner as well. Where did I hear that, Stephen? Where did I hear what? I've lost that train of thought. Where did I hear it, mate? Let me know what you're referring to. And I will be happy to respond to that as well. Eddie Marcella, you're in. Trusty on the right doesn't work. He can't make a 10-yard pass with his right foot. Using his left all the time puts him in awkward situations. Right. Let's be honest about this, Eddie. Trusty wasn't bought to replace Carter Vickers. He was bought to strengthen the left-hand side of the central defensive area. But we've been forced again to play two guys who are both left footers in the central defence. Liam Scales doesn't deserve to be dropped. So when everybody's fit, I think Trusty is on the bench at the moment. But I would like to see an opportunity for him to play alongside Carter Vickers on the left-hand side of defence. But certainly not at the loss unnecessarily of Liam Scales, who I don't think deserves to be dropped. But that is where I think Trusty can be judged. We've seen it before, haven't we? We've seen it with Starfelt. Starfelt was not a naturally left-footed player. And therefore, everything he did was always considering get it on his left side. Sometimes it was an extra touch, and often the extra touch put him under pressure, because if you're taking that extra touch, you're being pressed by your opposition. And I don't think we've seen the best of him. But what you're going to do, you're not going to drop Carter Vickers and play him on the right. And I think the situation that Trusty's in is kind of similar. The problem Trusty's got is we have a very able left-sided defender at the moment in Liam Scales. So Trusty might get his chance on the left-hand side, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I would like to see at some point Carter Vickers and Trusty lining up, and I think that was the kind of short and medium plan that Brendan Rodgers has had. But look how it's heightened Liam Scales' game. Stevie boy, you're in. That weekend could have been worse. Aberdeen deserved the draw. I agree with you. Still unbeaten, gives them confidence going into their game with the club formerly known as Rangers. 30th of October, isn't it, Stevie? They go up to Pittodrie. And I think that if Aberdeen were to approach the game like they did in the first half at the weekend, then it won't end well. The problem being, and this isn't me with my paranoid hat on here, the problem being, if the roles were reversed and they were to go doing 2-0 at Pittodrie and fight back and it's 2 each, Rangers get that penalty at the end. Now, I hope that doesn't sound paranoid. Rangers get that penalty at the end. We don't. And I've honestly not seen conclusive footage of it or a still. And if anybody can, point me in the direction of that, I would love to see it. It's very difficult to get that clip, because I've seen one from an angle where it actually looks as though it's ricocheted from up off his thigh and it's hit his arm. And if that's the case, okay, I get it. But it seemed as though, the ref should have gone to the monitor. The ref should have gone to the monitor. And if he's not gone to the monitor, then the guy in VAR, who I think was Greg Acom, has told him that, there's absolutely no doubt it's not a penalty. So that's frustrating for me. Aberdeen didn't deserve a draw, so Danny disagrees with you. We were all over them. They had 2 shots on goal and both unfortunately went in. I think where I would, by the way, you're not wrong, Danny. The possession stats were something, in the second half, there was something like 89% Celtic possession. So we dominated the ball, dominated possession. And as I said, at 90 minutes, when the board goes up and tells us that we've got another 10 minutes, Celtic were the team that were delighted. We thought we could get the win. I don't think Aberdeen believed that they could. But they frustrated us. They made the changes at half-time. They got the 2 goals back, almost got a third. Thank God the VAR decision was correct in that respect. But did they deserve a draw? I would say they did, because I just think that sometimes they deserve a draw due to your bad performance for the first 20-25 minutes of that second half. Small profit, says the Urban Culture, on Kelly, made up for my losses on Celtic. It's just a good job that Double Denim's not in today to block you. Apologies for that as well. Stuart Ramsey, afternoon Acsom, and all my fellow Tims, hail from a disappointed boy. And we've got Marky Boy coming in as well. Here we go. There was plenty of optimism ahead of the Dortmund game, yet think it will be a different feel ahead of Atalanta, so hopefully that will work in our favour. Guilty, Mark. Absolutely guilty. I was going into that Dortmund game feeling good about what we were seeing Celtic 7-up. Not just domestically, and I know that Bratislava aren't the best, but to get that Champions League win, and it was a meaningful win. It was the first game of an 8-game run at home, and not just scrape a win, but do it with style. 5-1. I was going into the Dortmund game thinking to myself that I'm as confident as I can be. Since then, I've probably looked at the squad thinking that we need to strengthen in certain areas. I probably thought that anyway. You get carried away as a football fan. Did I believe we could win the game? That's the question. Somebody's going to show me a clip where I said we could. No, I don't think so. I think that the frustration for me, Mark, was we were rubbish. Simple as that. We didn't show up. And if we had, and we were the best version of this Brendan Rodgers side in season 2, Dortmund probably would have still beat us, but it would have been tighter, and it wouldn't have been embarrassing. It wouldn't have been 7 going on 10. And I believe it was 7 going on 10. Yeah, there is a different feeling going into Wednesday night's game. I think the bravado that I probably had as a fan has diminished somewhat, and I want us to be a lot cuter. I want us to be smarter going into the game. And a lot of it is down to the personnel. Engels goes to Dortmund and has his worst game of the season. Kuhn goes to Dortmund, likewise, worst game of the campaign. He looked like the Kuhn of last season. He has a chance, and he's not sure if he's going to take a shot or not. That's not what we would have expected from those two players. There was a bit of needle going into this game in relation to them both having played in the Bundesliga. Kuhn has came out and said he wants to be a German international footballer. You've got to go and prove at the highest level that you're able to do that. Don't think he did. Engels had played obviously in Dortmund for his former club last season. He's going back there. There's a familiarity, and I don't think he played well. So going into Atalanta, you would hope that both those players and everybody else are absolutely on the top of their game. And even if we are, do we get a result? There's a wee poser for you in the comments field come Wednesday night at full time, where I'm sitting probably with Chris, maybe Sean, maybe Kevin, talking about this game. If Celtic play their absolute best and we create chances and we've got brilliant performances from back to front, do we still get beat? Let us know in the comments section what you think. Let's get as many of you as possible involved on the chat. Will Rodgers change his approach for Wednesday, says Alan Robertson. It's a great question, Alan. He says he's not going to, but you know what? Could be mind games. It absolutely could be. Did someone say, says Studs Lanigan, the dreaded line, wake up call? Possibly. Does McKeown's good form merit a start, says Alan Robertson. Listen, I think it's a good question, because I don't think that I think there's two people who definitely start on Wednesday night, Alan, and I think it's an easy reason why. First one's Callum McGregor. He starts because he's the captain. The second one's Arnie Engels. He starts because we didn't spend 11 million quid to overcome Falkirk in the cup and to beat Ross County away. We spent that money for nights like Wednesday night. And I know that it should always be on form. I absolutely think it should be on form. But I believe that those two jerseys are already filled. And then the big question is, who gets the other one? And then how do you line up? So if we play with the three midfielders, McKeown doesn't start for me, unfortunately. And that's wrong in a way, because his form would suggest that he deserves a start. I just don't think it's going to come against Atalanta. Maybe it comes against Motherwell. But I do think Engels and McGregor 100% start the game, and the argument is over Hatate or Bernardo for the other jersey. McKeown, keep him as an impact sub. But yeah, I don't disagree with what you're saying. IH Decorating, always a pleasure to see you popping into the chat. I don't care what anyone says. Our defence has not recovered from the loss of Starfelt. Johnston, Carter-Vickers, Starfelt and Taylor was our best defence in years. Okay, it's a good point, and it's an interesting point as well, because Starfelt was something of a whipping boy at times, wasn't he? And I know that simply by covering the games on Acsom and looking at the comments after the game, and obviously the social media thing. But sometimes that's a different kettle of fish, because everybody can be a whipping boy on there. But I don't disagree with that. I don't want to take anything away from Liam Scales. And I think that long term, Brendan Rodgers sees his defence as Johnston, Carter-Vickers, Trusty and Taylor. Long term in terms of, down the line in this campaign. But you can't drop Scales until he has a bad run of form, not just a bad game. But yeah, Johnston, was he better than Juranovic? What do you think? Let us know in the comments section. Keith Oakden, hello, all from Plymouth. You can kind of gauge the weather down in Plymouth, because Keith will remind you and tell you if it's a sunny Plymouth. But he just says hello from Plymouth. So hopefully you're enjoying it. How's Wayne Rooney doing there, by the way? I've not actually checked him. I do watch him on the overlap, but I don't check every single week how he's doing. I tend to look at the former Celtic players to see how they're doing. How is Wayne Rooney doing at Plymouth? Rob Lilly, well done on the solo effort, PJ. Almost there and away and get a drink of water. Have you noticed that I've done 54 minutes without a sip of any beverage whatsoever, Rob. You know what? From time to time, it's good just to be on your own. No disrespect to any of the contributors. I love Jerry and Acsom to bits, but it does allow me to engage a wee bit more with the comment section. Play Casper and Sinisalo and go. I think there's maybe a rule against that, Michael, but I can see where you're going with that one as well. Stephen disagrees. Can't play an 11 million player just because of his price tag, says Stephen. Okay, that's a good point, and I get it. I absolutely get it. But I just don't know what kind of signal it would send, Stephen, if you call out that team and Engels is sitting on the bench. I've already heard the people who already reckon that we've overpaid for him. You remember the moment that he's taking that penalty against Hearts and we're standing up for him because of the comments that are being made and all this kind of stuff as well. I'm not sure it would be good for the player. I think it comes down, yes, because of his price tag, that's what I said, but also the way that you manage the individual and how it's going to affect that player mentally, state of mind, if you go into one of the biggest games since he came to the football club and already he's dropped, match day 3 in the Champions League. And it's another one as well. I do believe that players can play through it. There's no doubt in his quality. That's the reason we spent the money that we're talking about here. No doubt in his quality. Sometimes they just got to play through the bad performances. If he's dropped, I'll be surprised. If he is dropped, Stephen, who are the 3 midfielders? Let us know. Here we go. McLaughlin P. Starfelt and Carter Vickers lost one domestic game together, so that's a plausible argument. It is a plausible argument, McLaughlin P. And there was also talk that Starfelt was available to bring back to the football club. People say, you should never go back and all that. I would take Starfelt. Absolutely. I think he'd be a great addition to a squad when you think that just under the surface of the first picks, you've got Stephen Welsh and then Mike Nawrocki, who is perennially unfit. I would have Starfelt back. I'm saying it right there. I'd take this year's Scales over Starfelt all day, says Kieran. Good shout. There you go. I'm a massive fan of Liam Scales. And as I said before, even though we've spent £6 million, I think for a partner long-term for Carter Vickers, he's not getting a game unless Liam Scales has a bad run of form. Play 4 in the middle, says Danny Boy. Again, you could flood the midfield, protect the defence, completely change your style, your shape, and then have an outball. Who would the outball be? I don't think it would be either. It's not his type of game. I think it's Kyogo or Maeda to terrorise them as high as possible. Starfelt was a colossus, says the DJ of choice. But it is interesting, and I'm not saying it was yourself, the commenter here. He got loads of stick as well when he was at the football club. Absolutely. Kalmack and Engels says Coffee and someone. Equals we're not going to do so well. McKeown will be cup tied, says Smell the Glove, for the semi. So should at least start versus Motherwell or his former side, Dundee, next week. I think he needs to get a start. There's no doubt about it. He needs to get a start. But I don't think that start comes against Atalanta. Does it? Midfield should be McGregor, Hatate, Stephen Kennedy, you're back in. The midfield should be McGregor, Hatate, Bernardo, or McKeown, as Engels has not been up to it. Again, I've given you my reasons behind it. That's just the way that I look at it. Whether or not Brendan Rodgers agrees, we shall find out on Wednesday night. What do we consider, says Dougie Lynch? That's an excellent question, Dougie. What do we consider a good result on Wednesday? Let's bring up the fixtures, the Champions League fixtures. And my view on the Champions League fixtures when they came out were such that I wasn't really expecting to take anything from Dortmund, right? Was any of us? I'm not sure. I probably wasn't expecting to take anything from Atalanta. And the way that Villa had started, I'm not really expecting to take anything from Villa. I think the only thing that we were saying was because it's the final fixture, Villa may well be already through, and there's not a great deal for them to play for, if that even exists in the Champions League. So what would be a good result? Taking anything from that game against Atalanta would be a phenomenal result. I don't expect to take anything from Atalanta or Villa. If you take a point from any of those two games, I think you should be absolutely delighted with that. The one away game, I think, is in Croatia. The one away game that I think we should be looking at, not confidently, but we should be looking at realistically to take something from, is the game on the 10th of December. And I think that at home, again, nothing is guaranteed, but I am still looking at Bruges and Young Boys, and I'm looking at both those games and thinking we need to approach them as winnable games. Won't be easy, won't be 5-1, but I think we should be looking at those two games. So if we get anything from Leipzig, anything from Atalanta, anything from Villa, we should be absolutely delighted with that. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. I have been running solo today, and that is 1 hour on the dial. Thanks everybody for getting involved. What else are we up to on a Celtic State of Mind? We're up to a lot as it happens. We've got a gig on Friday night. The live event is with Gordon Strachan and John Hartson. They'll be sharing a stage. I'm really looking forward to that. Never seen the two of them sharing a stage before. I have had stories from John about Gordon, from Gordon about John. No bad ones. But it'll be good to see that dynamic of the both of them on the stage. That has been sold out now for a number of weeks, that event. You can click on the link and go on a waiting list. If anybody returns their tickets, you will be emailed by Skiddle and you might be able to come in to that show. We'll be raising a few quid for charity that night as well. But on Saturday night, I was privileged and honoured to be asked to host the charity ball for wee Jamie Tierney. There is a link underneath this video and all of our videos if you're able to donate to Jamie's fundraising endeavours. His mum and dad, a young couple who live quite local to myself, Jamie and Bobby, they need to raise every single week of the year for the next 20 years, £1,200 over and above what they already make. It's just mind-blowing to think about that, the magnitude of that, because of the condition and the rarity of the condition of their son. They do not get treatment on the NHS. They need to go all over the world and pay for it at the cost of 60 grand a year. If we can do anything, we will, and we have had a great response. Jamie and myself met up a couple of weeks ago, and I handed over everything that was ready that had been donated by a Celtic State of Mind listeners. And some of the stuff was unbelievable. We had boxed jerseys, commemorative jerseys that had been sold as limited edition boxes. We had framed signed jerseys. We had framed signed images of guys like Victor Wanyama, Joe Ledley, Robbie Keane, Tony Watt. Unbelievable haul of items that you guys had given to me, either meeting up with me in Glasgow, coming to one of the events, handing stuff over. We had a jersey campaign where you were sending me your jerseys. Some of them were signed, some of them were not signed. We've been getting them signed. And I think there was 30 odd items all in, something along those lines, about 30 items that have been donated by Acsom viewers. So thank you all very much. They are still looking. It's Saturday night. If I need to come along myself and pick it up, I will be. I'll be in Glasgow this Wednesday to film. This is Acsom. Anything at all we can do to help me, Jamie, give us a shout. What we have built here over 7 years together as a community of Celtic fans, like-minded Celtic fans, and every now and again something drops through your door, a wee gift. For example, here we were given a wee gift here, The Fields of Athenry, my favourite, I'm going to say Celtic song. I know it wasn't written as a Celtic song, but it's a Celtic song. And I was sent that wee gift. And all these wee gestures that you get from time to time, it makes you understand that we have built a community. And that community has helped charity unbelievably over the last 7 years, raising over 110 grand. I've got the links underneath this video. And listen, times are hard. If you can't give money, but you can give a donation of something else that we might be able to raffle or auction off, get in touch. If you can share what we put out on the social media, that's important as well. Thanks everybody for your support. Join us again tomorrow. And by the way, wee Jamie, I used this photograph before, I'll bring it up again. Wee Jamie does have an incredible link to Celtic. So let me get this right. On the front row of that Celtic team group, and you may recognise a couple of the Celts that are in there. You may recognise Jimmy McStay, for example, the great uncle of Paul McStay, or John Thompson, the man who gave his life for Celtic, or Jimmy McGrory, who scored more goals than anybody else in British football. But in the front row, the lesser known Con Tierney. Now, Con Tierney is related to wee Jamie. All right, so great granddad's uncle. Unbelievable. So there you go. There's the Celtic link. If ever we needed one, if you can help us out, please do. Even if you can't, join us tomorrow again at 12:30. Hopefully somebody will join me for a Celtic State of Mind.